So when you're welding cast iron, you're supposed to heat up your parts, but with this Centronium 89, you don't need to heat up your parts. The only recommendation is that you should not have your part completely cold, so you should not try and do it in the winter. I'm going to heat this up just a little. If there's any chance of cracking, this should minimize that chance. So I've welded all around now. I think I have a fairly clean weld. So now I've cleaned this up with a wire brush, and there's scarcely any evidence of any lathe work or imperfection whatsoever. It's a completely clean weld. Oops. It's polished, there's penetration, so I mean, I can't complain. This is an absolutely perfect job. The other side seems to have come out as well very nicely. Now I want these brackets moved 1 inch backwards so that the axle tubes are 1 inch forward, so the whole axle has actually moved 1 inch forward. Now if I move the axle 1 inch forward, I need 1 inch longer control arms, which I've ordered. I've ordered custom control arms which are 1 inch longer than stock. So I've managed to TIG weld this, and now I'm going to So what you can see here is I've tack welded the control arm bracket in. The jig is bolted in. So the control arm bracket should be in identical location as the stock control arm brackets. This support tower needs something to guide it, so I've pressed in temporarily an old bushing until I get a new bushing. And what I've done is I've drawn a cord across between the C brackets and actually measured this with a vernier gauge. So this distance here should match that distance there. And after measuring that, they are accurate to within a millimeter. So that's very good. So I tack welded these on. So now I should be able to weld everything together. What's interesting is that you've got very close proximity of a control arm bracket to the housing here because this material is much thicker. So I had to angle grind a little bit of a chamfer onto this to get it to fit in there. I'm probably going to have to weld it from the inside and not the outside because there's no space here. So at this point I'm completely done with this jig. And I can remove it and actually throw it in the trash, I think. If I look down a line here, these two controlling brackets seem to be coplanar, which is nice. So everything's working out very well. So I'm quite pleased with how this geometry worked out. I've now welded these in, and what you've got to do is you've got to bend it down, you've got to tack weld it, and then you've got to weld along there. It's not particularly clean, but it will be good once it's painted, and there you can see that's a nice fit in there. What I didn't realize about these brackets is that they line up perfectly over here. This flush surface means that you don't need to worry about the angle, because it all works itself out. The other thing that I found is that it's easy to work out when you've got them parallel by just placing two square bars on them. And as you can see, mine are perfectly coplanar. So that's very nice. I can tack weld them in and weld, and then basically that sorts out the geometry of the whole axle. Now I've tack welded in one side, and I've drawn a cable across here and clamped it and adjusted the height exactly. Now I do have these completely parallel now, and that seems like a good way to make sure the geometry is perfect. Now over here I had to do a bit of a trick. If you look down into this hole, you'll see it actually is deeper than the tube. I've actually cut a crater into the tube with my angle grinder to make space for this nut, and I've tack welded the nut onto the other side of this plate, and this allows this track bar mount to be very close to the axle. Now there's a good reason for this, because if you look at the stock track bar mount, there's this gap here. This whole thing sticks out, and the problem with that is when you've got your steering at full lock, this comes very close to this bolt head, and if you're going to go with crossover steering or a steering bar between the knuckles, it's going to catch over here. In fact, this one almost does catch on some Jeeps, kind of just scrapes. So this sticking out so far is really a very bad idea. So on mine, because the whole axle tubes are forward by 1 inch, so they actually come this way, this is effectively flush and back 1 inch against the axle tube, so it gives you about 1 inch of extra space here, which is very nice. It does mean that your track bar comes very close to the axle, but that isn't a problem. So if we take the track bar, so here's a track bar, and we can fit it in, and there's no real clearance problem here. And this bolt actually now has, I've cut it so it just goes flush in there. Now this has been on here for 20 years, so no one tell me this is easy to get out, because it ain't. This is for a transmission. Transmission die.
with you. Oh, your mouth feels so warm. I like, ooh, 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 with you. Oh, your skin is so wet. I like, hey, ooh, 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 with you. Cold ice cream, taken with a sticky spoon. Apple slices, oh, custard and banana. Syrup, apricot, lots of cream to make it wilder. Hey, I like, ooh, 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 with you. Your mouth feels so warm. I like, hey, ooh, 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 with you. Oh, your skin is so wet. I like, yeah, ooh, 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 with you, with you. Tangerine liquors, a supplement of body's juices. Ruby grapes and wine, ancient Romans knew the portions. Cognac trifle, it gives the skin a taste of almonds. Lemon cream, forbidden fruit and kinky capers. Kinky capers, I like, ooh, 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 with you. Oh, your mouth feels so warm. I like.